Bismillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the Lockdown Library. My name is Asim Qureshi, and I hope that over the next month, during this period of Ramadan, when we're trying to take as many blessings as we can, that I can share some thoughts with you about some of the books that I've been reading over the last few years and how I've extracted meaning from these books in my own life, how they've helped to develop my own thinking. I think sometimes we read books and perhaps we even write book reviews, but we're not really thinking deeply about how do I extract some relevance from these books in my life. And so I'm hoping that over the course of these episodes that I share, that I'll be able to encourage many of you, and of course myself, even more so than I already am, to actually read more, but more importantly than that, to read more reflectively. Because it's one thing to read for enjoyment, and I mean, a large part of the reason I read is for enjoyment. I do enjoy reading books, I won't deny it. But I think it's also important that we don't just leave that piece of knowledge that we've received just there on the page, or just as a matter of enjoyment, that we really reflect on what these books are saying to us. And so I'm actually going to be encouraging people to read fiction as well, not necessarily so much over Ramadan, but generally in the course of their lives, because it does have relevance for us. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to make a convincing case about why. So I'd like to engage with the viewers as well. I'd like to hear back from you. So in the comment section, please do leave some questions. Please leave comments that you'd like to share of your own, from your own experiences. It'll be useful for me as well to learn a bit more about your processes, how you think about these matters. I'd be interested to know what your favorite books are as well. What was the last book you read? What was a favorite book? What is one of your favorite books? You know, all these things are important, and plus, it helps me to increase my my lists as well, so that I can improve the range of reading in my own life. When I think about readers, I often think about people I admire, people like Malcolm X and Assata Shakur and Nelson Mandela, people who have led to real change within the world that we see in today. And one of the things that really brings a lot of these people together is the depth to which they read, the depth to which they really try to understand the world that they were living in. And so when we think about people of the past and, you know, the people who really brought about change, one of the qualities that you'll find among them is really this quality of reading intensely. And they weren't just reading for the sake of passing time. For them, reading was an act of resistance itself. It was about learning not only who they were, but it was about learning about the world that they were living in order to change it, in order to be better versions of themselves, so that they could bring about a change in the society that was needed. And so I think that's really important for us to think about, because, you know, if we're stuck in the same place, in the same situation all the time, and if we don't think about our lives as a matter of something that could be better, something that could be different than what it is, then we can never bring about any kind of change. And one of the things that reading gives you, it gives you the ability to free yourself from the confines of the world that you see directly in front of you in this moment at this time. You can see past yourself. You can see past these invisible prison walls that we create for ourselves. So reading really can be an act of emancipation if we engage with it in the right way. So what are the benefits of reading? I think reading really does allow for an increased knowledge base. It allows you to discuss ranges of issues. You're able to improve yourself, to enrich your life, you know, and also a key is self-reflection. The Quran actually, when it's telling us to do iqra, like we quote this a lot, right? The first words that the Prophet ﷺ was given, read or recite in the name of your Lord. But that's not the only thing that the Quran tells us to do. We're also told to do tadabbur, to do reflection on the Quran as well. And this is the key, I think, especially with any type of reading that we do, that we're not just simply reading for the sake of reading to engage the text, but we're actually reflecting on the inner meanings, the deeper meanings. and in ways that impact our lives. Like I'm reading a piece of text. What lesson am I drawing from this for myself? And you've got to remember that the Quran is the 1/3 of it is stories of the past. We're being told constantly by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, look, read this text, think about the past, think about what lessons that I am trying to give you from these stories. The stories, the ahsan al-qasas, like the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, the best of stories. But for what purpose? For what reason? For reflection. We're told tadabbur, reflect on the Quran, not just read. Reading is just one aspect of it. There's a writer, his name's Timothy Snyder. He's got an excellent book. It's a very short book. It's called On Tyranny, taking 20 lessons from the 20th century. He says in it that history is a site of instruction. But how do we engage that history? We have to engage it through books. He writes, we might be tempted to think that our democratic heritage automatically protects us from threats. This is a misguided reflex. Our own tradition demands that we examine history to understand the deep sources of tyranny and to consider the proper responses to it. We are no wiser than the Europeans who saw democracy yield to fascism, Nazism, or communism in the 20th century. Our one advantage is that we might learn from their experience. Now is a good time to do so. If we understand that the stories of the Quran are not just stories, they're actually examples for us to learn from in the past, then really we have to accept that the whole of history has opened itself up to us to reflect on. And that's why we need books, because books help to show what that history is. We can read them, we can try and understand, and we can draw lessons from that history. To understand our present moments, we have to engage in this act. We have to engage in this act of looking backwards to understand the contemporary context that we live in. Not that, of course, we're living in the same times as the past, but really to understand what the mechanisms are that human beings go through in order to impress themselves and to oppress others, but also how we can potentially resist as well. The words that we use and the words that are used about us are not without power. They can have serious meaning in our lives. They can hurt us, they can harm us, but they can also free us as well. And so, as we go through this series, I want us to think about, how words are being used in order to construct us as Muslims, and how we're using them ourselves in order to free ourselves of these small confines that we are placed in. There's a really amazing statement by Ibn al-Qayyim. He reminds us of the value of knowledge. He says, actually, the point is that the Sublime specified that knowledge of evidence is a powerful authority because it allows one to have dominance and power over those who are ignorant. Moreover, the power of knowledge is stronger than the might of force, as people are more willing to follow evidence than force. In reality, the heart follows evidence while only the body surrenders to force. Evidence captures the heart and guides it. Even if someone is apparently stubborn and arrogant, his heart must surrender to its power and be overcome by it. Moreover, the power of rulers, if not accompanied by knowledge to administer it, is like the power of predatory beasts, lions and the like, i.e., force without knowledge or mercy. Yet the power of evidence is best exhibited when it is accompanied by knowledge, mercy, and wisdom. What Ibn al-Qayyim is reminding us is that we need knowledge in order to better ourselves, but we also need knowledge in order to have a strength of quwwah, of power in our lives. Through that knowledge, what we can do is we can understand ourselves and the world so much better than we already do. And we can also try and free ourselves of certain traps that are laid for us constantly and consistently. By having that knowledge, what we can say to ourselves is, yes, I live in a difficult world, but I also understand that world, and therefore I know how to resist it. Often people say to me that, when I ask them what type of books they read, they say, oh, I only read Islamic books. And that always makes me laugh a little bit because, I make the joke, oh, so you're a secularist. You make a distinction between the world that you live in and your religion. The joke itself is somewhat tongue-in-cheek. I don't really necessarily mean that. But what I do mean by it is that when we think of Islamic books as only books that are about Islam, then we forget the link between the world we live in and what we are reading. Things I often ask du'at is, do you read fiction? And I'll be honest, nearly always the response is, no, we don't. And what I try to explain to them is that, like anything else in life, when you know something better, then you're better able to understand how to engage with that thing, how to engage with anyone. One of the ways that I know how to deal with government policy that I think has gone bad is by studying the government policy itself. That's what I do. I read all of their material and then I react to it. I respond to it. I try and break it down and analyze it. Because I can't claim to be able to critique something if I hadn't understood exactly what it is that I'm critiquing. So going back to the du'at, one of the things I say to them is that, well, really, like, who is your target audience? As du'at, as people who have been given the duty by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to spread the message of Islam. What is it that you're trying to achieve? Well, obviously, for them, they want to speak to others. They want to speak to other groups, to maybe, Muslims and non-Muslims, and try to help develop them. For those who are not in Islam, to help them come to the religion. We obviously care about all human beings and we want them to enter into our faith. Muslims, to help them on their way, to help them be better than they currently are. And one of the things about fiction is that you have all of these people writing. They're writing about their lives. They're writing about their fears, their loves, their hopes. They're writing about every single part of what's inside their heads, that it would take you a lifetime, an absolute lifetime, to interview enough people to get that information. But books have given us an easy way of accessing that. They've literally placed all of their frailties and their fragilities on paper for us to understand. And so it becomes an amazing resource. We get to better understand who they are. And with that comes empathy. Empathy is such an important part of what the reading experience gives us. What we're able to do is really try and find ourselves closer to people, to understand them better. And by understanding them better, we're better able to then engage with them and to then relate our own message to them as well. So these are the reasons that I feel that reading a range of literature is so important, so that we can really open up conversations with others, that we can really make them think about what we have to give, but also to understand them better. Before I end this first episode, I just want to think a little bit about how we might be able to improve our reading habits a little bit. I think people sometimes get intimidated by books, especially large books, and they'll start them and stop them. But like the best deed, it should be small and consistent. So let's just try to do a little quick maths about some of our reading habits. So the average book is around 250 to 300 pages long. If you think about the fact that it takes a slow reader about 2 minutes to read a page. So let's say, again, it's a 300-page book, takes about 2 minutes to read a single page. What does that mean? It means that it takes about 600 minutes to read an entire book on average for a slow reader. That's of course 10 hours. Now that seems like a lot, but let's break it down. If you only read consistently every single day, 15 minutes, that means you would end up reading a book every 40 days. That's 9 books a year. Now, if you're one of those people who was struggling to read a single book in a single year because you keep on picking it up and putting it down, then I think this is a really kind of great tool just to think about how you would finish so much more content in the course of your year just by simply, dedicating 15 minutes. Literally, that's all it takes. And again, I'm talking here about 2 minutes per page is for a slow reader. If you're a faster reader than that, then that 15 minutes gets you through more. And if you read for half an hour rather than 15 minutes, again, there's the numbers start to increase dramatically. And before you know it, you could be reading 20 books a year. For somebody like myself who, does read a lot, I also listen to audiobooks. That might be more beneficial for some of you. I usually use audiobooks for the kind of content that I wouldn't necessarily read, but it's something that is interesting to me. So, I'll just have it playing in the background while I'm driving, or I'm walking to the train station, or in the lost minutes of my day. I think it probably frustrates my wife a little bit that even when I'm like, doing, the washing up or anything, or any kind of chore, DIY around the house, I always have an audiobook in my ear that I'm listening to, because why not? If it's a way for me to be able to get through extra content, then I think that's a really great thing for us to be able to do. So I'm not saying that everybody should necessarily be like me, but what I'm hoping this first episode does is that it gives us a convincing argument, first of all, why we should read, why we should increase our reading habits, but also that if we're not reading so much, that we can at least start, we can make an effort to read more consistently by just taking on a small amount, and maybe doing it as a family exercise, maybe encouraging your children to read with you. So having an allotted 15 minutes in your day where you're all sitting together, you're just reading and doing nothing else. And what that will also, potentially do is it just help engender that love of reading, not only for yourself, but, as a family, as a communal exercise. And then, of course, what comes from that is the ability to discuss what you're reading as well. So between yourselves, you'll be able to talk about, well, what is the book about? What benefits are you taking from it? And how is it helping you in different ways? So inshallah, this is just a first episode that, I wanted to concentrate a little bit more on why it is that I read, what the purpose is, what the significance is, and hopefully encourage others that, as you now look at the different books that are out there, that you might look at them in a different light. Maybe you'll pick up a fiction, maybe a non-fiction, but at least what you'll do is think about, well, what does this book mean for me in terms of its personal significance? So inshallah, from next time onwards, what I'll be doing is I'll be taking a book each time and really thinking about that book and trying to draw some lessons from it so that we can think about books more carefully together. Jazakumullah khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Stay tuned to Islam 21C to catch the front row for the online masjid.